This video has been classified as M. It is recommended for people aged 15 years and over.
This is Big Ideas from the ABC.
When I came home from hospital, the first thing my mother did was get rid of the evil eye that she was certain had been cast upon me. She begins by gathering some items from around the house and brings them to the kitchen. The first is a pair of scissors. Vor lezonin gedrem, she tells me as she places it on a large tray. I know what they were all saying. I shouldn't have gone on that holiday because you were about to do your HSC. Like I knew this was going to happen, she tells me. She says, shaking her head, "This is to cut their tongues that cursed you." Next, she places a thong on the tray. "What's this for?" I ask. "This is so wherever you step foot, their wagging tongues don't follow you." I suddenly get a flashback. "You know what, Mum? When you and Dad were gone, do you know what Nina said to me?" "What?" "She said that there is nothing wrong with our family, that we're all good." I never liked that, Nina. I said, "Nina, don't say that. No family is perfect." Jealous and envious, that's what she is. She sprinkles some salt on an onion and puts it on a small plate. She places the plate on the tray. Now this is to get rid of the evil spirits. You know what else I remember? Your friend Janet came over to check on me, and I started to feel like she was not only inspecting the house, but inspecting me. I didn't like the looks I got. I began to feel uncomfortable. My mother's small eyes expand, and it's clear that she knows exactly what I'm talking about. This is what the mirror is for. She places it on the tray to ward off evil looks. The final thing to go on the tray is a small bowl of water with a needle inside it. I look on curiously and wonder what she's going to do next. Then to my surprise, she takes out something small and silver. "What's that?" "It's lead." "Lead? What are you going to do with that?" "I'm going to heat it up." "Okay, now this is where you've got to stop asking questions and let me do what I need to do. You need to sit still for this to work." She calls my dad. He comes out of his room. "Tony, put this blanket on her head." My dad covers my head with the blanket, then holds the tray above my head. My mother puts a small piece of lead in a spoon and begins to heat it over the gas stovetop until it begins to melt. I can hear it fizzing away. She throws the hot lead into the bowl of water with the needle in it, and then she takes the lead out of the bowl with the spoon. She melts the lead again and then throws it back into the water and then repeats this action for the third time. When she heats the lead for the fourth time, she doesn't put it back into the water, but grabs the needle from the bowl, pierces the lead with the needle, then goes and throws it in the backyard, then waits until it stops fizzling and cools down. My mother grabs the lead off the grass and then shows it to me. It's formed into what looks like a face that has tongues shaped like snakes protruding from the mouth. "Look at all these tongues," she says. "See how they were all talking about you?" I stare at shock in the image before me. So many tongues in the shape of S's slithering everywhere. "We're nearly finished," my mother informs me. This time I'm made to stand with my back to the yard, and she gets rid of the water in the bowl by throwing it over my head. It splashes to the ground. She puts a ribbon through the hole in the lead and goes into my room. There's a framed picture of the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus in her arms. She takes it off the wall and turns the frame over, then hangs the lead onto the hook of the frame and then puts the frame back onto the wall. "This is where it needs to stay," she says, and walks out. A lifetime later, I'm in God's house. I'm staring at the bronze-coloured statue of the Virgin Mary holding her son in her arms. To my left, the bishops are chanting prayers in an Armenian dialect, which I don't understand. I keep looking ahead and focusing on the image. All the while, I can feel eyes burning into my back. I quickly pray to St. Michael for protection, cast into hell Satan and all the other evil spirits who prowl through the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I know what they are thinking. She's the one who stood by her. You know, the one that appeared on Today Tonight, walking alongside her. I get lost in the flames of the candles burning brightly near the statue, and I remember how Lena and I walked into this same church on that very dark day. She put her hand over the holy ones and pleaded to God to save him. "I'm not meant to be happy," she wept, and I wept with her. My Hokkud is my dad's sister. She doesn't believe in the evil eye. She says God is the only protector. I don't want to believe in it either. I mean, can jealous people really cause things to go bad in your life? Haley Jones didn't think so. I remember one day in class she laughed out loud when I explained what it meant. Then she died of a blood clot. Aussies are different. They don't blame others for their misfortunes. I've heard them say things like, "That's life," or "Shit happens." My friend wants to announce on Facebook that I'm appearing on TVS, Sydney's community TV channel. Can I advertise it on my status? "I'm sorry, no, please don't," I reply in my email. "But I want everyone to see your performance." "Look, I know you mean well, but I don't want certain people to watch it, and not because I'm embarrassed, but because I believe in bad energy." I'm relieved that she doesn't push it further. The morning I make my television debut, there's a message on my home phone. One of my mother's friends has seen me. Apparently, she's turned on the TV, and there I am. Bullshit! Who watches TVS? I tell my mother. I run to my room and grab the holy water. My mother comes after me. What are you doing? I hastily hand the bottle. Quick, pour it all over me and start praying. What? Oh my God, I'll do it. You just pray. I grab the bottle back off her and start pouring the holy water all over me. Look how wet you are. Ahote. Haid Med, our Father, again, Haid Med. I shake my head furiously. God knows who else she told. The whole Armenian community probably watched it. Calm down, please protect me, they're going to get me. After the third Our Father, I turn around and stick my butt out. My mum looks at me and begins to laugh. Voret kerem. Her slender fingers begin to scratch hard on each cheek about 3 to 4 times. My anxiety begins to ease, knowing that each stroke is warding off a wagging tongue. The next morning, I'm headed to FBI Radio, where I've been invited to read a short story I've written. Just before I'm about to leave home, an email notification flashes on my phone. I'm taken aback when I see the email has come from Alice Bunyan. She writes, I heard you were on TVS last night. Where the hell did she get my email address from? I checked it out online and oh my God, you were so funny. Good to see you're doing so well, Tamar. I take a breath. She's still the same condescending bitch she always was. I haven't seen Alice since school. Her dark green eyes, long silky chestnut hair and perfect smile flash before me. I close the email and then get it into my car. I make the sign of the cross. Asvads hedas parientemus. As I'm driving, I begin to relax and start to sing, Stuck on you. Got this feeling down deep in my soul that I just can't lose. Guess I'm on my way. Then, pow! I get hit from behind while waiting at the lights. My whole body falls forward onto the steering wheel and I feel the whiplash of the seatbelt against my neck. I knew it! I begin to yell as I slowly pull to the side of the road. I try to calm myself down before I get out of the car. A young brown-eyed blonde-headed girl gets out all shaken up. I'm so sorry, she says, as she stares at my smashed-up bumper bar and her broken lights. It's all right, we're both okay, thank God. I look at my watch. The interview starts in 10 minutes. Look, sorry, I'm in a rush. Can we just quickly exchange details? I've got an important meeting I have to get to. She nods her head and then reaches into a car to get her phone. So what's your name? Alice. Sorry? Alice. Of course it is.
I take Ma to a play at the Greek Theatre in Marrickville. In the middle of the play, the lighting board fails. During the intermission, we smoke cigarettes and talk about how bad it is. Around us is the assortment of creatures you would see at any Greek community event. Disgraced academics, compo-wogs and old Stalinists. Anomaly, says my mum. They romanticise the ancients and think we are still linked to them. They choose to be blind to the 8 centuries of Ottoman occupation. Our bloodlines aren't pure anymore. Our melanin is as dark as our aspirations. We complain about the play and reviving a dead culture. We complain about the people and how bad it was all the way to Belmore. She asks me when I'm going to cut my hair. Tu bushy pitas? My mum goes to bed and I'm fully dressed in the kitchen drinking Arapaki coffee. I'm wearing a brown rib jumper from Taro Cash with my father's pants from the 70s. Underneath my jumper is my gold cross. 4 hours ago, I had sex with Hish. The first time I met Hish, he picked me up in the street. I was walking home from the train station when a Commodore pulled up alongside and opened its doors. The guy inside had smooth, lean muscle and spectacles. The Holden was shiny, so I jumped in. After our first time, he would meet me in the steps of the Archiepiscopi Naos up the road from my house. We would drive to the rail yards and have sex in between the valleys of rock piles. During the rain, we would couple in the sewer near my parents' house. Initially, he told me his name was Jacob because he wanted me to think that he was a Christian. He didn't realise I would figure it out with his cut dick. He was lean, flexible, and a carpenter. He would sit on my dick and I could suck him off and fuck him at the same time. Once in the sewer, I didn't have lube. The condom broke inside him and he felt it. I ate his smooth ass and he compared it to another guy we both had sex with. We both picked up Sarkis up at the toilet blocks on separate occasions. Sarkis was a Maronite, told everyone he was modelled, but was actually a hairdresser. He drove a shiny white Audi coupe. Hish and I talked about how disgraceful it looked around Belmore. I wanted a HSV or Monaro. He said not to bother with the 2005 Holden Monaros. They have terrible turning circles. To get to Oxford Street from my home, I drive up Canterbury Road. After condoms and syringes were found in the school playgrounds, the sex workers were moved down, all the way down to the industrial area of Bankstown. On Oxford Street, I keep my head up, walking down the street. Sometimes I make eye contact with guys. I find the entrance to the upstairs part of the Columbian. It used to be more for older money, gay men and out-of-towners. It's called the Columbian because everyone there is coked up, I used to say. Walking straight into the upstairs toilets, I'm reminded of how cool I used to think it was. Stencils and street art on the toilet doors. Tom of Fidland meets Banksy. Underneath, investment bankers bought vials off hustlers. Through the side of my eye, I catch an image of a guy behind me. He has a strong jawline, receding thick brown short-cut hair and pale white skin, almost pink. He is dressed in a sleeveless black hoodie and grey jeans you can't buy in Australia. He speaks to me, and his vowels are rounded and refined. His voice is deep and wealthy as it pronounces every syllable. "Peter, what are you doing here?" says Freddie D. During the late 90s, my sister took me to a party on City Road. Everyone was a university student. I was still in high school. I spent most of my time talking to a guy who raised money for an armed insurgency. He had thick brown facial hair. He was from Fairfield. I sat on the ground. I watched but did not speak to the gays. They danced on ecstasy to a shitty stereo that was lit by tea candles. One of them said to my sister, I sleep with older guys so I can stay in nice apartments. One of the guys had a futon and did an arts degree. His name was Freddie D. I'm here meeting mates. I lie to Freddie D and wash my hands. Outside the toilets we meet. He gets a G&T for himself and a vodka Red Bull for me. We sit next to each other facing the dance floor. "Can you handle the vodka Red Bull?" he asks. I'm tough. I'm a fag that went to high school in Bankstown. He laughs over the music. "So what's going on for you at the moment?" I ask. "Well, I'm working at the Broadsheet and I'm the resident AD at a theatre company," he says as his chest puffs up. I think theatre is a moribund art form, I say. "Yep, you're right," he says without thinking. "What about you?" "Me, 3 days a week in Bankstown. You've never been there, have you?" I ask. "No, I haven't," he says. "You've probably never even spoken to a hijabi." I turn my head away from him, scan the crowd, hoping to see hish or a type of hish. "Hijabi?" "You know, a chick with a..." I say. "I did an interview with the chair of the MWA." He scratches the top of his forehead where he's receding. I read that. I thought when you asked her about homosexuality in Islam, it was just really dumb," I say. "Why is that a dumb question?" he asks. "It's just something that someone like you would ask." Freddie D sighs, his mud eyes trying to take me in. "But I really expected that question. Of course you'd ask that. Of course," I say. "So then what would you ask in an interview?" He takes a sip from his G&T. His palm is all the way around the tumbler and it covers his face. I wouldn't do the interview. The last of the 4x4 handbag house stops. As it does, he opens up his wallet and pulls out 2 Mercedes and he puts them in his mouth. He kisses me and passes me one of the Mercedes via his tongue. We decide to move at another club. At the next club I can't dance, I am feeling my heart. He is up and moving around. He looks for me. He gets me a drink. I'm settled in deep fake leather. People smoke around me. I have my hands in my lap. "Are you okay?" he asks. I nod, licking my lips, blinking as I swallow. He goes to dance with another guy. He feels him up, moving along him, pressing his crotch into the guy from behind. The other guy doesn't do anything. I should go back to my parents' house to my single bed. Right out the come down, listening to the sounds of an industrial train line in our backyard. There is a guy opposite me. He's in his 30s and drug skinny. He's smoking and I lean over the coffee table and ask for a cigarette. The guy looks me up and down and says no. I sit there a while. I get up. I go to the dance floor and Freddie D is still dancing with that guy. I try to move but my body can't. I shuffle towards the toilet. I go into an empty cubicle and try to piss but nothing comes out. In the mirror my pupils are huge and the pores of my face are open, covered with a thin shine. The cold water tap is not working. I have to use the hot water over my hands. It gets hot quickly. I feel it slower than I'm used to. I sit back on the couch. Freddie D comes over. He gets a cigarette off the drug skinny gay, and the drug skinny gay eyes him up. Freddie D sits on my lap. He puts his palm on my cheek. He moves his hand down my neck. He finds my gold cross. Sorry, my mum gave me that, and it brings me good luck. I stutter. My eyes blink hard. My eyeballs are rolling. No, I love it. He kisses me and then takes me to his house. Freddie D lives alone in a 4-story terrace. His parents bought it for him. I shower in a bathroom that he had renovated. It has a tub on 4 legs, a simple shower, a small mirror. Simple decoration in an upper middle class home to force contemplation on higher intellectual pursuits. I lie on his mattress, firm but deep. During sex, he looks at me in the eyes and I can't hold his gaze. For 2 years when I dated Freddie D, I often watched House Sitter starring Goldie Hawn. The protagonist is a lovable con artist who constructs multiple imaginary worlds. She falls in love one night after a one-night stand but craves home and community. I would sit in his attic, eat a bucket of ice cream and imagine that one day we would live together and his family would get me. Once I had a dream. We both had grey beards and sat over a breakfast table. I tried planning trips together, but he kept on going overseas. I would stay in Australia. I worked at the Ethnic Communities Council. Freddie D once said that the reason the ethnic industry existed was to take people like me out of poverty. I wanted to live with him, and he said that he didn't want to live with a guy that went straight from his parents' house to living with his partner. I didn't explain to him that's what Greek people actually do. When he went OS to one of his family homes in the south of France, I decided I would move out to demonstrate my independence with the hope of a future living together. I went out and got my own apartment on the border of Lakemba and Belmore. I asked her to be monogamous with me, and then I cheated on him with this preppy guy from Beirut living in Punchbowl. He went out and took ecstasy, and I found out by going through his phone, and then I claimed I had a psychic dream. When he got an Asian cleaner, all my WOG friends told me to dump him. We would go out to a party or stay home and often had fights. We said the terms wrecked a lot, as in you wrecked everything. He played classical music and we had a fight when I said, this music is for the ruling classes. Another time he jumped out of my car in anger when I tried to convince him that the Da Vinci Code movie was one of the best documentaries I'd seen. He broke it off one morning in bed. I turned on my side and started crying and he leaned over the top of me to see what was going on for me. All I had in my apartment was a futon, some chairs, 2 camping tables. I only cried once in public to my friends. My face was stone. I went on dates with guys who never remembered me. I picked up unemployed guys in the street. Once I sat in Bankstown Plaza and a guy walked up to me and wrote his telephone number in my book. He was half Maltese, half Leb and was unemployed apart from occasionally DJing at christenings and weddings. I would pour milk in my bath and drink a bottle of wine in the hot water and wake up in the next morning in the cold tub and go to work. This trans man gave me heaps of hydro and I would smoke it every night after the gym. Then every time I talked on my mobile phone and heard an echo, I thought that the government was listening. I thought that the news pole was controlling the weather. At dusk, I sat in the driver's seat of my car off the back streets of Darlow. Muscle queens with HIV would pass me meth pipes from the back seat. To recover from the meth, I would drink a bottle. Every second day, I'd still go to the gym. My apartment got flooded with water, and I thought that the factions in government had something to do with it. When I tried to close my eyes, all I could see was a strobe. People stopped understanding me, and my sister took me to the community health clinic. Before I went, I tried to find my gold cross.
One. I received this in the mail today. Looks like someone had found my photo ID at Sydney Olympic Park and handed it in. This was my first ever photo ID. Till then, I had never owned a camera either, so actually having a photo of myself that was not a school photo was kind of exciting. I got it done at the Fairfield Motor Registry, just down the road from where I was working at the time because I had needed it for work. The last time I had been there in a similar circumstance, actually, it was at the Bankstown Registry at least 10 years before that, and I was accompanying my mother to help her renew her driver's license. I did not know that you had to take a ticket nowadays and to wait on those square plastic chairs with square armrests and contoured seats, and they were all filled up. Fairfield's rego was always packed. I had to pass by the place several times before, holding out for a day where the queue did not extend outside into the car park. When my ticket was called, the lady at the registry checking my form said to me, "You haven't been here before, have you?" No, I had not. I had avoided getting any sort of proof of age or proof of identity on me. At the time, I went about fine on foot and bus and train, and if I had to go places, "Hey Andy, got your ID?" "Nope." "But we're going out for drinks?" "No thanks," unless we were going out to a cafe. No bars, no parties, no clubbing. Considered myself a homebound intellectual at the time. Till I got the ID, I sometimes carried around my passport, and then that expired, and then I started taking a copy of my birth certificate with me, and that was pretty cool too. But it was the permission, I guess. Like someone had said, "Okay, you're a responsible adult, you can decide things and do things for yourself, here's a card." Besides, this way I could also avoid the whole car, learning to drive nervousness, ownership burden, price of petrol agony thing altogether, and it was a good place to be. Two, Felicity and I are waiting in a school office. I'm telling her about this guy at the train station who had approached me and asked me what I was doing there. He was pretty aggro, I say, like he was ready for a fight. Maybe he was a cop and thought you were dealing drugs. The reason we were at the school in the first place was that we were running workshops in writing for the students. It was our third week in, and both I and Felicity had arrived early. Since we were waiting, I thought I wouldn't pass up a chance to share an anecdote either. I had not had a chance to be writerly for a while, so I honestly, unfortunately, had very little enthusiasm left for this particular school that we were working at. In fact, Felicity had arrived even earlier than I had to speak with one of the staff members about some concerns we had about our work so far. She sees me typing into my phone. "Are you thinking this will be a story?" I say, I don't know, but I tell her I at least needed to write an incident report that this would help me to remember later. And I try to be very particular with the detail. I make sure I could get the description of that guy as much as possible. Long black hair with grey streaks, slightly shorter than I was, though it didn't feel like he was at the time with the way he spoke and stood up against me. I really thought he was going to pick a fight. Then the bell went. I finished up my notes and we filed into the staff room for a quick update with the teachers before heading into the classrooms. And then I stop at the doorway. My hands grab onto Felicity's arm next to me, and then everyone is looking at me. I hear my name being called. "Andy, what's wrong?" "Felicity," I say, and squeeze her arm even tighter. "I don't think I can do this anymore." My shirt is covered in dirt and grass. I have one eye closed to hold back the pain from the bruises on my head. It is almost 9 p.m, but it is November, so it is still light out and people, children and parents are about. I see them barely through my weird, foggy vision. I'm not sure if anyone was staring at me, but I could feel it, like they must have me in the corner of their eyes, keeping me in their sights, trying not to look like they were doing so, aware that there might be something wrong with me. I know, because I'd do that as well. If I saw me staggering around like the way I was, I'd act like I wasn't even there, couldn't even approach me if I needed help. I came first to a community centre. It was closed, but inside there was a cleaner. I recognised him because he cleans one of the other council buildings where I often work at. The glass doors are locked, so I knock on them, and when he notices me, I mime furiously, asking if I could come in, if I could use the phone, and he shoos me away. I head to the next building along, which was open and had people in it. I lean myself against the door to push it open because by now I really am about to fall over. I interrupt a class of young people learning self-defense, about 10 of them in this tiny foyer area, and not knowing who exactly to speak to, I just say it. "I'm sorry. Can someone call the police? I've been attacked on the street." Three, I eventually did get my driver learner's license. No waiting amongst the queue at Fairfield that day. I'd booked my appointment ahead of time. And then it was done. My face on a shiny new card. A sense of making some sort of progression in life. And I thought the best way to celebrate that milestone was to immediately go and get myself a new bicycle. Yeah, take that. I headed into Fairfield Heights, the nearest place where I knew was a bike shop. Up a long street past nothing but homes for half an hour walking. Buses only just started connecting these roads no more than a year ago, but I had always walked here and I could still walk, so I walked. And when I got to the shop, I just stood there. 2 long rows of bicycles stacked in front of me, wheels hung on the walls. Customers came in and out, some with their bikes, coming in for repairs, bikes of all sorts. While I waited, ahead of me, a short, middle-aged man was showing the technician what was wrong with his bike. An equally short bicycle with a wire shopping basket on the handlebar and a gigantic link chain and padlock wrapped around the seat. It was like a garage. I had no idea bicycles got serviced. Behind the counter, one was hanging on a lift, its wheels getting tested. There was no way I would know what I wanted, so when the saleswoman came up to me, I said, I would like some help getting started. Of course, that was not entirely true. I already knew how to ride a bike. My brother and I used to sneak out on the weekends to the park down the road with our rusty second-hand BMXs. We would cross this rotting wooden bridge over the orphan school creek, excited that it would fall apart under us at any moment. We would head on over to the netball courts when they weren't being used and circle about. I don't remember racing each other, we just rode around and around. My father had a tall, thin bicycle then as well, old style even at that time, a grandfather bike, I used to call it, with its rusty bell and shaky tubes and gigantic wheels. He used to take it to go to the shops, and I would ask to go along and ride on the back, on the carry rack, holding onto his shirt, feet dangling just off the ground, and I believe that would have been where I learned to love riding. Because I still remember that dusty smell of grit being kicked up off the broken asphalt streets, of being open to the air, of being so close to the road, speeding by underneath with hardly anything in between, of having to hold my tiny feet at just the right spot, aware of how easily the back wheel would drag my little body off and onto the road, and if I tucked them in too much, they'd get chewed up in the spokes, and I loved that. And I loved getting grazes on my skin. When I rode along with my brother for fun, we used to dare each other to do increasingly tighter and tighter turns, our bodies more and more parallel to the ground, to see how well we could play the physics, until one of us would trip up and come out of it with bits of gravel embedded in us, while more pain scratched off our bikes. And then we'd keep going, arms and leg with red raw patches, but breathing and laughing. Then we would come back and get in trouble for sneaking out. We could not really go out back then. We were fine. If we saw a syringe, we knew not to touch it. We just wanted to ride. But eventually we did just stop. We outgrew our bikes, and then they simply rusted away. So now I just wanted to start up again. I left the shop with a cheap blue and white mountain bike and a new helmet, both measured and adjusted just for me, excited with all the things I could do, but didn't really know what exactly. I walked it back down the street, down past the rows of houses, back home, pushing alongside on the handlebars. I didn't want to ride it yet, I just wanted to walk it first, push its tires down the streets and listen to the gravel popping under the nylon wheels, the gear hub ticking, 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 ticking. I walked it past high school students, school having just let out then, feeling out of place that I was the only one with a bike but wasn't even on it. When I reached the Orphan School Creek sports ground, the one with the stretch of netball courts, the same ones my brother and I used to ride around on, I decided this will be where I would start up again. So I strapped on my helmet and just went for it. It was like swimming. The body remembers. I started pedaling like I hadn't ever stopped, and I flew across the netball courts, up over across this new bridge, and then I was back on the road again. Easy, open to the air, feet close to the ground, speeding past me, and I was almost home too when I needed to let a car overtake me. I rode to the left as much as I could. I didn't want to be a nuisance, but then my front wheel caught itself against the curb, and in a flurry of flying dirt, I stacked it on the concrete edge. scratched the skin off my knee and the palms of my hands for the first time in 15 years, and I picked myself up and kept going again. Four. Immediately after the attack, a family member had said to me, "You should think about learning to drive." Well, thanks, but no, that's not the point. I used to walk everywhere, at any time, with little trouble at all. Considered walking my making full use of my capabilities. Eventually, when I got sick of hailing taxis to get me back and forth in the evenings, I started walking again, especially near my home. On streets that were quieter, those narrow ones without any lane markers, I would walk straight down the middle of them so that if anything did happen to me again, I could at least hope that a car might come by sooner or later and find me there. But then I started cycling. I still walk and bus and train, but if I could, I would cycle everywhere. Like I have a favorite trail just because, and I would ride through the Western Sydney parklands and to climb up Sugarloaf Ridge, burning the muscles off my skinny legs just to get to the top so I can look out east, through the polluted air to see Sydney sprawled out below. Then today I received this in the mail. It was my first ever photo ID, but I had lost it with my wallet and my phone that day on Phelps Street in Canley Vale, 3 blocks from my home, around the corner from the primary school in which I attended. Trigger warning, approached by 2 young men shouting, "Give me everything," while surprisingly soft knuckles bashed my face into the dirt. I remember, straight afterward, feeling more angry than anything else. Not in my neighborhood, how dare you? That's why I keep walking. And I'm standing there in front of my mailbox, holding this envelope and this photo ID that somehow made its way back to me over a whole year after I had had it taken from me. This didn't come with a trigger warning. Why would it? And I might have stood there too, like the way I did that day in that school after that incident with the aggro man at the train station. But now I had my bike under me, and I knew I had gotten over it. By this point, I even had another ID made to replace this one, and even then, my driver's license replaced that. So I did what I now do out of habit. Got my camera out, took a photo of it, posted it up on Facebook. Was about to ask around for opinions on what to do with it now, and then I get it. I can answer that question that day when Felicity and when she was asking me in that school, just before my refusal to step out of those staff room doors because I thought I would never pull myself out of it again. Are you thinking this will be a story?
So I got this call from Sabahattin Amja. He told me about an excursion Emre had gone to with UTS. Apparently he hadn't called or was a day late or hadn't returned or something. He asked me if I had heard anything about his son. I didn't really think much of it. We weren't as close as we used to be, and Emre always had trouble with his dad. I remember it being all fun and games at his old place in Auburn until his dad came home. He used to make us type out English literature on the computer to improve our typing and vocabulary skills when we were younger. We used to complain a lot about our father's authoritarian brand of fatherhood and plot ways of getting them back for it. I remember this one time, Emre laughing like crazy when I told him I was planning to put honey in my dad's pajamas and how I wanted to chuck a Holden Caulfield and stay in a motel in Manly. Emre ended up flattening the tyres of his father's van just before we went to work the next morning. I thought it was something like that. I thought he got shitty with Sabahattin Amja about something and decided to go spend the week in Manly. Sabahattin Amja is well into his late 40s, but he's got a face like a puppy. Big nose, round chin, full cheeks with worn laughter lines, perfectly bowled up top with single white hairs that streak his bushy eyebrows. A charming face. Something he uses to his full advantage. He's a guy with a pretty interesting story. He came from Turkey's southeast, a place called Şanlıurfa, which is kind of like what Western Sydney is to the rest of Sydney, except over there you get water from a well and electricity comes on intermittently throughout the day. At least that's how I imagine it was back in his day. He basically came from nothing, but he's a very sharp thinker. He thinks like a fox, slightly devious. He speaks rapidly, always pushes boundaries with others, but always with good humour too. A lot like Emre, actually. He must have studied like crazy because he got into uni and graduated from the Middle Eastern Technical University, just like my dad. Getting into uni was a big deal back then. So Sabahattin Amca came down here. He brought Nesrin teyze and had his only son. He started up a home appliance repair business and has been rising early in the morning, getting in his van and going to people's homes to fix their broken washing machines and air conditioners for several decades now. It's a dirty job, I would know. I did work experience for him. And then I worked for him tax-free for a few months when I was about 16. He paid me $25 a day and bought me kebabs for lunch. He'd call himself Harry or Paris when dealing with customers. Both names suited him. The older ladies loved calling him Paris. It made the most of his broken English, and his good humour worked a charm with them too. He has a shop now a short walk from Auburn Station, but he began the business from this humble little cottage home on a cul-de-sac street that was on the quiet end of Mona Road. There's a bunch of Asians living there now, but that place is so full of memories to me. I used to ride my bike over there when I was younger. Emre's place was the preferred location of rendezvous. It was really close to Auburn Station for one thing, and he had an Xbox for another thing. There was a corner store right down the road where he'd always bribe me with Magnum Egos. We used to play cricket in his small backyard, which was made even smaller by the dozens of old washing machines Sabahattin Amca would store around for spare parts. My mum would scold me for staying at the place late at night, but Nesrin teyze never minded me staying over so long. They took me in as family. It's kind of what happens when all your relatives are overseas. I remember the glorious paperbark tree right outside his place. We used to climb it or use it as imaginary cricket stumps when we played out on the road in front of his house. He threw something that had fallen out of that tree at me once out of spite, and it almost got me in the eye. There was this brief moment where we looked at each other and he gave me the, "Oh shit, I'm so sorry" look. My response? "You fucking..." And without finishing, I chased him down the entire street until he took refuge in the corner store with the Magnum Egos. The next day I came over and I didn't have to beg him to shout me one. Sabahattin Amca's family moved to Ashfield after building a double-storey rectangular brick home just down the road from Emre's new school, Trinity Grammar School. It was a pretty lavish place for a family with a single child. I ended up joining him at that school a few years later and spent a lot of time at his new house, but there was always something cold about that place. We had our fights. In fact, we had a lot of fights. Our whole friendship was based on challenging and invalidating each other, so discussions would escalate into arguments really quickly. I remember having a day-long heated argument about the Iraq invasion, utterly shocked that he'd support such a thing. But it taught us to poke fun at ourselves. It was a constant thing, and it never really did affect our friendship. We had known each other since we were babies, and he really was the closest thing I had to a younger brother. I remember finding out from his mother that he had begged to go to Auburn West Primary School because that was the school I was going to. He really looked up to me in that way, though he'd never admit it. We got the call from a mutual family friend. My dad drove the family up to Ashfield. We're driving past Rockwood Necropolis on an overcast day, the jacarandas in full bloom. We're all silent. There was this feeling hanging over me. Everything outside felt so unreal, so absurd. It was rude. It was rude. It felt like he had spat in all of our faces. That feeling didn't go away for weeks. It just got soaked in grief. The whole community turned up to mourn Emre in that brick house. Turkish families and some of Emre's immediate family friends slowly filled up the home. Emre's cousin Ismail was a fat and charismatic fellow from Turkey who loved his food and was studying here to become a chef. He was having a smoke outside when we arrived. Khan was next to him. He was the guy we used to call El Mafad. He was younger than us and used to laugh along with us when we teased him until he gave us a black belt arm twist to get us to stop. There were the Kurdish kebab store owners, good friends of Sabahattin Amca's. Their children were running around the front lawn. Emre always hated those kids. There were the Aman Tanrım, or the Oh My Gosh girls, the group of insecure daughters of Turkish families who wore golden crescent star necklaces and couldn't speak the language properly. Emre used to tease one of them with his Borat accent for having a big nose. You have big nose? She recently got a nose job. Emre's best friend was in terrible shape inside that house. He was crying into his mother's shoulder, who was whispering something in Arabic to him. Sabahattin Amja was outside on the balcony drinking tea with all the men. His mother was pale and emotionless the whole time we were there. She was an overweight woman who used to be a lawyer in Turkey, but spent most of her time now watching Turkish dramas over satellite TV. There was always something aloof and detached about her, but people started whispering to each other after she showed little reaction to what had happened. They thought she was taking it especially hard. I caught a rare moment when she dropped her head into her hands and heard her say quietly, "Emre, bunu niye yaptın bize?" But it was only for a moment, and I couldn't help but feel that it was a rhetorical question. There was something she understood. The place got busy quickly. Everyone was in a constant state of shock. Suicide was virtually unheard of in our community. People struggled to comprehend why he'd do such a thing. Looking for a reason was reason enough for them, it seemed. Turks talk. Rumours started emerging. They were ill-informed and spoken by people who didn't really know Emre. They crept under the rug just out of earshot. Something about a girl in the North Shore. Something about a gambling debt. None of it mattered to me. There was this desperation to keep as busy as possible in the days following his death. I remember going on a bit of a goose chase with Sabahattin Amja. We were trying to track down where Emre had gotten the sleeping pills from. After a fruitless attempt at the local clinic in Asheville, Sabahattin Amja and I returned to the car. Just before we got going, he told me about how he'd noticed a few $1,000s worth in shares missing from his son's portfolio. He didn't think anything of it. He asked his son to look into it. Emre had responded positively. He said he'd be sure to do so. He told me that he found out Emre had gambled those shares away on some A-League soccer game. He said he wouldn't have gotten mad at him if his son had just told him. The words must have struck so hollow for him at that point, because he broke into tears and collapsed into my arms in the car. I held onto his head tightly. I remember feeling the feeling of his head. His scalp was smooth, the follicles evenly spaced and hairless. My hands were damp with a mixture of his sweat and tears. Emre spent his last day having a barbecue with Mark on the balcony next to his room. When Mark left, he moved the Mongol with the hot coals in it to an unused spare room. He used black masking tape to cover all the gaps and ventilation, turned on the fan, placed it opposite to him across the bed, and swallowed the pill. The monoxide would have gently brushed across his face and seeped into his lungs while he was asleep. Ismail was the one who broke into the balcony window to first find his cousin's corpse. Emre had inflated like a balloon. His parents thought the smell was coming from the construction site across the road. They endured their son's death for 3 days like that before Ismail broke in. They thought the lock had malfunctioned. I remember what Ismail had told me a few days after the suicide. Her şeyi vardı burada. Her şeyi. He had everything here. Everything. He shook his head, trying to comprehend the shock of what his cousin had done. I thought there was something wrong with me at that moment, because I never went through that shock. I thought it was because he and I were distant at first, but later I realized it was because I understood something, at least more so than everyone else. He hated himself.
It's about 8 o'clock when Mum and Dad leave for the wedding. I'm left at home with my 2 younger sisters, Yoshida and Efrat, and our older cousin, Hussein. Hussein is 18 and came from Lebanon. He's the son of my dad's brother and has been living with us since he was 7. This is common in our community. We often take in the children of our third world relatives. They turn this place into the third world too. I have to share my room with Hussein. Yoshida is 15 and Efrat is 13. I'm 16. None of us are allowed to move out of home until we're married. My parents think this will happen soon, especially for Yoshida, but times are changing. Lebo guys don't get married at 18 anymore, and Lebo girls don't get married at 16 anymore, especially not to our cousins. My parents have this strange idea that Yoshida and Hussein will marry. We debate for about an hour on what we'll have for dinner tonight. Dad lost his temper before he left, shouting that there's plenty of food at home and we shouldn't waste Mum's fucking cooking. She's made kifta and rice, and then there's the vine leaves from last week. There's nawashif in the fridge, man'ush from this morning, and then there's all the other nawashif in the fridge too. Shanglish, hulumi, hummus, labni and olives. My mum says, why don't you go to Abu Ahmed's and get a farouj, a charcoal chicken? At least it's halal. We live in Lakemba and there's halal chicken everywhere. The Whiteys love Lakemba. They love the Indian, Pakistani, Indonesian and Arabic restaurants. They love the way people dress, the hijabs and boxes balanced on African mums' heads. They love the saris and they'd never admit it, but they love the burqas too. They call these things costumes. Whenever I'm in the Whiteys' company, down at the Multiculti Youth Centre in Punchbowl, they always tell me how lucky I am to be living in Lakemba. I'll bring in a zinger from KFC and the manager of the centre will go down the street and get a falafel roll. He's got blonde hair and blue eyes, just like paintings of Jesus. The only difference is that Jesus isn't short and fat. He brags about being a vegan and being a Buddhist and doing his yoga classes, and he acts like he isn't sexist because he appreciates natural, exotic beauty, like that of his Vietnamese wife. While we eat, he says to me, how can you put that stuff into your body? Then he bites into my culture and his wrinkles expand and contract as he chews. Even though we've been debating, we all agree that it'll either be KFC, Hungry Jack's or Macca's tonight. Just up past the main drag in Lakemba, along Canterbury Road, the three fast food giants are lined up. Hussein drives with a frat to get dinner. He's the first and only one of us to drive up until this point. He got his P's first go in Dad's manual column shift ute. He's such a wog. Hussein and the frat return with burgers and cokes from McDonald's. Hussein's exhaust is huge, so Yoshida and I hear his Skyline pull into the driveway as soon as he's arrived. I hear the ice jiggle in the Macca's cups as they make their way from the front door to the TV room, which is up at the back of the house. We live in an old wooden house that my dad has been extending year after year. Then he turned around one day and said, you know, I really should have just knocked the place down and built a new house. Now we're stuck with a place that has 4 different kinds of tiles. The TV room is where we spend most of our time. It's connected to an open kitchen and there's an L-shaped lounge set that surrounds 2 of the side walls. There's a 50-inch TV in front of the lounges. Above the TV hangs a picture of the Mother Mary, which was a gift my mum received from one of our Lebo Christian neighbours. We're not meant to believe in images of Mary because we're Muslims, but we're all too lazy to bring it down, even though it angers all our Muslim guests. It just sits there, reminding us that God's mother is white and that we can never be like her because we're all a bunch of sand niggers. We got it, Efrat announces as she enters the room. She's so compact that the 4 large Coke cups in the cardboard cup holder engulf her. Yoshida and I slide up a couple of coffee tables and we all sit together facing the TV while we pull the food out of the bags. Hussein eats McChickens and my sisters eat McNuggets. I love cheeseburgers and we all love chips. We start unwrapping burgers and sucking on Cokes as the TV series Daria starts playing on MTV. It's this animated show about these 2 teenage girls named Daria and Jane Lane. Everyone thinks they're depressed and emo and have low self-esteem. Efrat and I are the only 2 in our family who actually like the show. I don't watch the opening credits. Instead, I put all my attention on my cheeseburger. I lift the top bun and slowly start laying my chips over the cheese and pickles. Then I cover it, and while the opening credits of Daria chant, na 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 na, I pick up the burger in both hands, look at the screen, and take my first bite. The bun and the tomato sauce are sweet, and the mustard and the pickles and the chips and the onions are salty. I say out loud, this is the shit, bro. My love affair with McDonald's started when I was 5. Hussein had only just arrived in Australia and couldn't really speak English yet. My dad owned 2 stalls at Paddy's Markets and kept all his stock in a massive warehouse in Redfern. Most of it was secondhand shoes and heavy old cookware, and there were mounds of it all over the place. On Friday afternoon, my dad would take Hussein and I to the warehouse to load the ute for the market. This would take about 3 hours. Hussein and I would ask what we would get if we did the work. I'll take you to Macca's, my dad would say, but only if you sweat. The thing about it was, no matter how hard I worked and how fast, I couldn't drip. And it made things worse that Hussein looked like he'd been wandering the desert. Whenever my dad would turn, Hussein would come over and swipe his fingers across my forehead to see if I'd began to sweat. Then in Arabic he'd say, "Ghammid ayunak," close your eyes. He'd step back about a meter and he'd spit on my face. Then he'd come over and smear it across my forehead. At the end of the work, my dad would come over and smear his hand across my forehead too. Then he'd look at Hussein and say, "Yes, just." We eat fast and watch quietly. In this episode of Daria, there is an art competition running at the school and Jane Lane has been encouraged to enter. "What's this show called?" asks Hussein. "Diarrhea." My sisters and I ignore him. He lets his comment linger in the air a moment longer and then he finally says, "This show is fucked." I turn and stare at him. He's sitting with his legs apart. It looks like he's doing weights with his McChicken. He's in a black singlet. His elbows are on his thighs and the burger rests in both hands. As his hands move to and from his mouth, his biceps flex. Hussein is a big guy. People always ask me if he's on roids and I don't answer. Yoshida takes in a deep breath and says to him, "Just watch it, man." Yoshida spent her childhood cooking and cleaning up after us. She too is a small woman, but like most Lebo girls from Bankstown, she makes up for it with her opinions and her confidence. My parents have been pushing for her to get married, but the only guys who have been coming along are imports looking for a visa. Yoshida rejects them one after the other. My parents get frustrated, but she just ignores them. "Can I at least have someone who speaks English?" she says. "And no, I don't mean Hussein, he's like my brother for God's sakes." Today, Yoshida's long black hair is tied up in a bun, exposing her small face. She sips from her Macca's straw and it sucks in her open neck. "But seriously, what's wrong with these guys?" Hussein continues. "They're all fucking retarded." My sisters and I continue trying to ignore him. We keep watching the show as a conversation about Jane Lane's painting unfolds. She's painted a picture of a skinny, fair-skinned, blonde-haired girl frowning at herself in the mirror. At the bottom of the painting is a caption that Jane Lane reads out to her class. "She's so much prettier. She's so much thinner. She goes to the bathroom to spew up her dinner." Efrat, Yoshida and I all start laughing. I notice Hussein staring at us, and then back at the TV, and then back at us. "What's so funny?" he asks. We all turn and look at him. "What?" he repeats. His jaw hanging open like an ape's. "Isn't that supposed to be like bad?" Efrat is still giggling when she says, "You're so dumb, man." Hussein's lips close and tighten. He slams down his burger and pierces Efrat with his gaze. "What'd you fucking say to me?" His burger falls to pieces across the floor and Yoshida quickly moves in to pick up the scraps. "Sorry," Efrat shoots back quickly. "You disrespectful little shit," Hussein continues. "Get out of here, Lee. Yallah, get out of my face." Efrat doesn't say another word. She gets up and walks out of the room. Yoshida stays quiet too. She goes over to the kitchen and brings back a garbage bin. She starts putting away the Macca's cups and Macca's bags, leftover chips and coloured burger wrappers. Hussein stares back at the screen. I look around the living room, wondering what just happened. I look at the breakfast bar with plates of Mum's food left out, covered in Glad wrap and alfoil. Then I remember Mary watching us, reminding us of all the Muslims we've angered. I begin to think maybe this wouldn't have happened if we were eating Mum's food and then the TV station changes and I turn and look at Hussein. He's sitting there, bearing a frown, his thick black eyebrows caving in, and he has the remote in his hand. He flicks for about 3 seconds looking for something he likes, and then when he finds it, he puts down the remote. Is that what this was all about? I ask myself. I get up and leave, and I feel him turn and look at me as I do so. I walk through the house. Past the TV room and the kitchen is a small corridor with a bathroom on one side and an enormous mirror on the other. Below the mirror is a bench top with boxes of fruit on it. One box overflows with mangoes and one box overflows with bananas. Then you enter the living room in the center of the house, which has these old woggy leather couches and a large coffee table in the center. This used to be where we would all sit before my father renovated. Now it's only used for visitors. There are picture rails that surround the living room, and along them hang verses from the Quran in wooden frames. There is also an old cast iron fireplace in the corner that no one ever uses. After the living room are the bedrooms. Efrat and Yashida's room is on the left-hand side, and mine and Hussein's is on the right-hand side. Our parents' room is down at the front. I go into my room and switch on our old Dell computer. It belongs to the whole family, but we keep it in my room because I was the one who whinged at Dad for 6 months to buy it. As I wait for the computer to load, I hear Hussein make his way through the house to Efrat's room. He opens her door and starts shouting at her. The computer screen slowly flickers white words as I overhear Hussein going at Efrat. "You know how disrespectful you are," he starts at her. "You got no manners. La abuki. You'll see when your parents get home. I'm going to show you ihtiram." I listen quietly, but my blood begins to boil. I can't hear Efrat responding, which means she isn't. "All right, bro, leave her alone," I shout out. "What'd you fucking say to me, you little faggot?" I rush up out of my room and meet Hussein in the corridor. He's standing there between the doorway to the corridor and the living room. "What'd you call me?" "I called you a faggot. None of you show me any ihtiram. No fucking respect. You, mate, you're a little faggot. You and all your Aussie faggot friends. You know how bad I want to smash you? I swear, if you weren't my cousin." I run over and give him a push. He nudges back, but just a little. Then he strides up to me. "Come on," he says. "Come on." Part of me thinks I don't want to hurt him, and the other part of me thinks I can't anyway. I throw a punch, a fast jab, and it hits him in the temple. "Come on," he screams. I start pushing him, and he begins to make his way back towards the bathroom. I see him tensing up every part of his body, his arms, his shoulders, his chest. His veins are popping, and I know he's restraining every urge he has to punch me out. "Come on, you fucking pussy!" I scream. "Fucking hit me!" "Ah!" He groans and he grabs me and I grab him, and then my sisters are in between us, begging us to let go of one another. He pushes me off and I fall back, and my sisters stagger back with me. Hussein grabs the box of mangoes and throws it into the air. The mangoes splatter all over the tiles. They flatten and some of them even unpeel. Juice covers 2 kinds of tile. Then he punches the toilet door. He hits it so hard it blows open and there's a hole left in the center. As my sisters and I gasp, we hear him turn on a tap and start washing his hands. "Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim," he prays, "in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful." It takes about 20 minutes for all of us to cool off and start cleaning up the mess. I collect as many half-decent mangoes as possible and put them back in the box, but there's nothing any of us can do about the hole in the door. The mangoes are soft and squishy. I'd once heard that in boxing, this one guy got hit so hard, his brain detached from his skull. The mangoes feel just like that. Yoshida mops down the floor and Efrat vacuums the debris from the door. We turn off the lights and we all go to bed. About 2 a.m. we hear my dad shouting. We go out into the living room and he wants to know what happened to the door. My mum stands behind him saying nothing, draped in a purple dress which is covered in diamantes. There's a long pause. Efrat, Yoshida and I all look at each other. I'm about to say something when suddenly Hussein looks my dad straight in the eyes. He starts crying and he says, "It was my fault. I did it." My dad's lips tighten, his hands clench, and I see his veins starting to bubble just below his cufflinks. He's still in a black suit. His black curly hair has gel in it, and the hairs on his beard flicker. "Where do you learn all this fucking shit?" my dad screams. He looks around for something to destroy and he sees a box of mangoes. He grabs it and throws it into the air. The mangoes are in pieces before they hit the ground. And Dad doesn't understand why.